I'm the Ballister Geist of the classroom.
And that is a perfect note to open up on. Hello, everybody. We are on Andrew's channel today because I was not prepared in the ways of the live stream, but I will try to my best of my ability to facilitate the discussion here. Usually what ends up is like we ask, you know, how'd you find the book? And then it just goes on from there. So I'm kind of expecting a similar thing to happen. But we are discussing book 3, An Autumn War of the Long Price Quartet today. I didn't bring my book downstairs, unfortunately, but yeah, you guys can hold yours up. Should we do introductions again? I guess there could be new people every time. We could quickly introduce ourselves and I guess just like go from Philip and around in a circle from there.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm Philip Chase, and I have a YouTube channel where I talk about fantasy. And this has been a great experience reading the Long Price Quartet, I have to say. I've enjoyed the first 3 books immensely. Much respect to Daniel Abraham's writing, particularly his character work is just brilliant. So I'm really glad that Alan has been shouting about this series for so long, The Long Price Prophet. There we go. He's been convincing people everywhere to the degree that there's been a shortage on the market of this particular series. So that's an accomplishment. So that's a nice segue for you, Alan.
Yes, I'm Alan, Library of Alexandria. I read this series, and it's like I haven't read anything like it still. Just and you know, everyone will understand when they finish it. Zara understands, because she read the 4th book also already. But it's just incredible. And this, though, after sitting on it, I like the 4th book probably the best, just because of it as a conclusion. This book has probably my favorite moments in it. Some of my favorite moments in it. This was the book where I realized that Daniel Abraham was one of my favorite authors after reading this one film. So good.
Is it my go now?
I think Andrew, because we're circling. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're here on my channel, but if you don't know who I am a professional weirdo who likes to read sci-fi and fantasy and then post videos about it on YouTube while I act hyperactive. However, I do have a deep passion and love the Long Price Quartet, and also just really enjoy getting to talk with just some amazing people who are here today. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
That was a great introduction, Andrew. You should definitely use that verbatim for all
future. I'm starting to. I'm definitely starting to just introduce myself as a professional weirdo.
Hey, it works. It works. But I'm Nico. Also have a fantasy booktube channel, and also ended up getting this picked up because of Alan and just hearing so much about it. And I really, really enjoyed this series. It sounded like even from early on, it was going to be the kind of thing that I really, really found myself gravitating toward, which are these just, you know, sometimes a bit slower, but extremely well written, just complex stories. And so I've had a blast reading this. It's been like over a month since I read An Autumn War at this point, but I've waited. I haven't read Price of Spring yet. I'm still waiting on it. But it's, just the things that are done here are fantastic. So I can't wait to talk more about this book.
Yeah, and I think everybody here really liked this one. I don't know where it ranks for everybody in terms of what they've read so far. Alan's read them all. This has definitely been my favorite so far. I've really liked the progression. But I just wondered if anybody, before we start talking about some in-depth spoilers, maybe if everybody wants to give just a little glimpse at their thoughts and how they felt about the book.
This book for me was I was sold from the prologue. I think the prologue, Ballister Geist, the characterization of Ballister Geist, and just in the prologue, like, sold me. And I think a lot of it, because Angela and Katrina, they weren't really super sold on Ballister Geist. Like they don't love him the way that I do, and because of that, like, they didn't enjoy this book as much. Like if you're not along for the ride with Ballister, I can understand. Some people don't like those single-minded characters, but I loved it. And just the world building that Abraham does in that prologue where he describes Balasar and like the two other guys that emerged from the desert, where he talks about a desert that's made of paper, like you'll walk on ground and you'll just fall through and that's the consequences of the last time that the Ondat went to war. And just that is like all for a book, right? Because and the stuff that Balasar says about the only reason they haven't destroyed us is because they've chosen not to, and that no one should have gods in their pocket the way that the Kaye does. I was like, you right. Like, you are right. Like, they could destroy you at any time. They literally do have the power of gods, in their pocket. I loved it. Like, I was sold from that part.
It's a brilliant prologue.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Sarah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say that it does a good job of tying back to the themes of the previous novels. I think that Abraham really gives us a chance to empathize with Balasar early on, because we've seen through the eyes of our main characters how fickle the Ondat can be and how dangerous the power that they wield is. And we've seen the characters that we've seen them struggle with those similar ideas. So I think it makes, even if characters like Balasar aren't your favorite types of characters, I think that it immediately helps add an element of grayness there. Like, that he is on the opposing side of the characters we've followed, but you can immediately understand where he's coming from. At least I felt that way when I started the prologue.
Yeah, that's well said.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Nico.
Oh no, I was just voicing agreement. You go ahead and continue with your thoughts.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I was gonna say how when Alan brought up that. Are we doing spoilers now? By the way, is that cool?
No, I think this is the very brief non-spoiler thought.
Okay, so non-spoiler.
We're all eager for spoilers.
I'll keep it non-spoiler then. I find it interesting how I felt the same way about Balasar. Just right on that opening, it was just brilliant, and I immediately liked this character. And it's amazing to me that I can like a character and understand his reasoning for doing something that actually is, when you think of it from a different perspective, like say the perspective of somebody from the city-states of the Kayam, it's actually pretty horrible what he's doing. It's actually it's terrible. It's like genocidal. It's amazing how I can like this character and at the same time take a step back and realize, wait, what he's actually doing is awful. And how come I like him? So Abraham starts making me thinking about, what is it in me that likes this guy, but at the same time is abhorred by what he's trying to do. And as much as, you have this situation, just broadly speaking, of adversity between the Galts and the city-states of the Kayam.
Yeah.
And yes, it's true what Alan said, that the Ondat are like a nuclear weapon that no one else has, and they have this threat looming over all their neighbors. But who's actually the more aggressive culture? Who's the one that's been invading other people's territories? Who's the one that's been actually killing other people? Whereas the Kayam, they're in a state, you can see in the first two books, they're in a state of equilibrium. They have, it is like a Cold War situation in a way, where they all have each city-state has its own Ondat, and you mess with us and we'll have to mess with you. And they seem to be coexisting pretty well. So it's interesting how I think that's a sign of a very talented author who can get me to feel so invested in moments in a character when I'm with that character and with that character's perspective. But when I'm in a different perspective, I can see just how awful this is too. So it's pretty brilliant stuff.
Yeah. This is also the one where it just, like, he just continued to show me that you can write strong female characters without them being like mighty warriors. You know what I mean? Like, I think Kian and Liat, the growth of how much more I like Liat in this book versus freaking Shadow and Summer is like just seeing how they have grown. And then Kian I love Kian. Like, I love Kian so much. Like, he started this with, I loved Amat from the first book, and then Adan in the second book, and then here Kian and both Kian and Liat, I just love what they're doing while the men are playing at war. because they're instrumental to keeping everything running, because everyone else is out, I guess, getting killed by people, like out there trying to slow down the Gaults.
He does.
Yeah,
I would say he does middle-aged characters better than anything else.
Oh yeah. These, like, that is one thing I love. Just seeing how different Moti and Ota are, and Liat, from Shadow and Summer, but how we are the same, even though it's 30 years later. Like, especially when we start talking about Moti, like, that kid is still that kid from Shadow and Summer, just middle-aged.
With a pot belly.
Yeah, and losing his hair.
For me, I really enjoyed An Autumn War. I don't think it's my favorite yet, mainly because I felt certain characters, and I won't go spoilers yet, just their decisions just didn't. Oh, I actually don't even remember this character's name. It's been about a month and a half.
Sinja sucks. It's Sinja.
Yeah, Sinja. Sinja sucks.
No one except Philip likes Sinja.
I like Sinja.
I didn't understand that his entire decision-making thing, like, at all. It was
ignore it. Just ignore Sinja.
But other than that, it was a fantastic story.
Don't ignore Sinja. No. Don't listen to Alan.
Definitely just pretend Sinja's not there. I hate Sinja so much.
I remember I was messaging you, Alan, when I was just like, what is Sinja doing?
Philip's going to tell us.
I'm going to tell you later, but I'm going to let Nico talk first.
Yeah.
I was just saying, I didn't have a problem with Sinja. I thought the part made sense, but I won't super elaborate there. I've had like a bunch of different responses to everybody's things, so I don't even know if I remember what I was going to say, like, for general thoughts. But no, it's just been like, we have such a great group, and I could just listen to everybody talk about this book, and it's like bringing it all back to me too.
Sinja gets with Ota's wife in freaking the intervening years. That alone is like, you're gone, bud. See ya.
That whole thing seemed like there was more to the story, and it starts to kind of talk about it, but it was kind of like, it seemed like it was more to that, but
doesn't matter. Yeah, overall, don't be in love with Ota's wife. Get out. Bye.
But yeah, overall, it's just this book really did elevate the first book, especially. There were elements from the second book too, but it really brought up things from the first book. And yeah, with Geist too, and some of it, it's, can't get into as much without spoilers, but like his motivations, I really enjoyed his motivations, because it was very different from the motivations we'd seen coming from the Gaults. It was completely different, and like a lot of his own people weren't going to be happy with him, even if he was fully successful, because he kind of just had his own vision. And it is, he was doing terrible things, but just kind of that vision and that following, it also, for me, this kind of answered a lot of questions I had about how things work here, because several times, and Alan can vouch, I'm like, Alan, why the heck is, like, do they not just do this, or why doesn't this happen? And then book 3 like explained all of the reasons why you can't just do that, and why these things are and so it did a lot to really like answer some of those questions, fill in blanks of things that I felt like were holes and really weren't. There were actually really good explanations that made perfect sense. So it was another thing I really enjoyed.
Yes, it must have been hard to be Alan during the first couple of videos where we were like, what is this happening? He would just say, trust the process. Abraham knows where he's going, and it's true.
Giving away what happens in Autumn War is beyond, like, that is stuff that you write people out of your life for, like damnatio memoriae, erase them from history. If I had this book spoiled, like Daniel Abraham, just like when I read it, I didn't know you could do that in a book. Like, you can't. How I have read so few fantasy books where the author has altered the world itself, like the entire world. He's altered with, like, those stakes are too high. Like those stakes are too high. Those are the stakes you're fighting against in fantasy novels, and they never happen because it takes too much balls to actually make it happen, because then you're stuck with those consequences, and you got to figure out what you're going to do after you've completely altered the fabric of the world that you've created. So, our heroes beat that at the end. You win, or if they don't, that's the end. Yeah, and you don't have to deal with the consequences. Screw it, right? I don't think I've ever seen an author alter the world that much and then have a whole book after it to deal with the consequences. I was just like, whoa, like, do you realize what you've done? Like, can you do that? Because I don't think any of us expected, like, there's no one here who expected that to happen, to where, like, okay, I guess everyone's screwed.
Yeah, that was definitely not at all what I was expecting. I was expecting something bad, very bad, to happen, but that was a really big surprise, and just immediately my mind just started turning, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen in the fourth book? How is this all going to happen? And so it's definitely been a crazy journey in this book.
I think we can probably say what it is. I think if you're here at book 3, I think we're fine. We're fine probably to talk spoilers.
And there's so much to talk about in this book, but this again is the moment that I knew Abraham was brilliant. When Moti summons seedless/sterile, and we see that Abraham has been planning this from the first chapter of the first book, the prologue.
Yeah.
I still get chills thinking about how, like, you think Moti's done it, because Moti's like, oh, I figured out a way to bypass the price. Like, nice. And he does. Moti does bypass the price. And then we realize, oh crap, he failed, because the thing's there. So we're like, he did it. Moti did it. But then it's like, oh no, he didn't. No. He did it wrong. He failed it. And then he's telling Ota, like, hey, Ota, this is your fault. Like, the whole point of the Daikavos school is to weed out kids like Moti, who can't control their emotions, who aren't fit to be poets. That's its point. Is it cruel? Yes, you're right. Like, Oto's right. It is cruel, but it's to prevent what just happened. And that's the scene from the prologue of Shadow and Summer, where Ota's like, hey, Moti, this is what they're doing. It's all a game. Like, they're going to do this, and I'm gone. Bye.
And you find the prologue so strange when you read the first book for the first time. You're like, what is this weird side story that I'm getting? And yeah, it comes full circle.
And it's because of that. And that, like, I just couldn't believe it that, I hadn't seen it. And then he telegraphs, like, Moti's like, I'm going to dodge the prize. And we're like, yes, he's going to dodge the prize. And he does dodge the prize. But it's like, I'm rubbering your glue. Everything, like, it bounces off of me and then it sticks to everybody else. And when Aya is sitting there, like, it's just, and then Ota is just like, you got to go. Like, you got to go. And they're like, okay, Samai, we can go to here and here. And Ota's like, no. You cannot tell me where you are, because when my wife demands to know, I can't know. Like, I can't know where you are, because she's already going to be pissed that I didn't kill you myself. And it's just so heartbreaking, because Moti is just trying to fix it. He's just trying to help. He's still that little kid who wants to feel important, who feels devalued, and he's mad. It's like, it's not fair. Like Ota's fault. It's Ota's fault. He told me to do it. And Moti's just such an amazingly tragic character. And, like, I could talk about Moti all day. He's one of my favorite characters in fantasy, just because of how complex he is. And I love Ota too, but I think Moti is more interesting to me because of how he's not really he's just a tragic kid in a 40-something-year-old body. And so that whole scene is it's absolutely brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
It's effectively
it's not
done
even just from the first book. It's like in book 2 also, he was supposed to recapture Seedless, and he failed, and that's kind of what started his disgrace. So it's not only like, if he would have done it then and failed and taken the price, this wouldn't have happened either. But it was his continued failures, and then he's like, I'm finally going to be the hero, and nope, you're even worse of a failure now, and you drug everybody else along with you too.
But what I can't forget is that, Alan, I believe you said Moti's still your favorite character out of the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think he is, for me, he is a more interesting character. I love Moti. I just am like, Moti, stop. like, stop. But like Nico said, he wants to play the hero. So it's not all selfless. Like, he wants to play the hero. And remember, the reason he screws up Seedless is because he's like, you know what? Screw it. What if I just like I'm doing this to stick it to the Galts? Like, he does it out of anger, and he's trying to. The Undead are not supposed to be weaponized. You cannot bind them with that in mind. Like, they're meant to, and that's what screws it up. Is he is determined to repay the Galts for all of this genocide that Ballister is bringing. What were you going to say, Philip?
I was going to say I think that Moti is so easy to identify with because he's a great example of how life doesn't follow the script that we have for it, and how often we feel pretty disappointed by that, and how it leaves us feeling kind of like losers sometimes, that we didn't become what we wanted exactly. And I think that's something we can all identify with at different points in our lives in different ways. And so Moti really is a character I think a lot of us just feel that pain. Plus that scene at the end is just so we are doing full spoilers now, but that scene at the end that you talked about, I think it's so effectively done because of Aya's presence there. And we see this happen to a particular character that we know and that Moti loves and we love. And he realizes, oh, I've done this to someone I love, not just to millions of women in the city-states of the Kayam. It's to this individual that I love here, who is like a daughter to me. That's a tough one. That's a really tough one right there.
Oh, yeah.
But you still,
I expected it to happen to her. I didn't expect it to happen to everyone. I started, as it was getting closer, I'm like, oh no, she's here. Something's probably going to go. And then just the whole reveal being even worse, but still extremely personal, like you said. Yeah, I thought that was the best way to illustrate the horror of what was really happening, having it be that up close and personal to a character.
Well, that's what Abraham does best, though. I mean, we talk about all this political intrigue and like these ramifications, but like whenever I talk about Abraham, it's the human character interactions that always pull me in. Because I mean, like Alan said earlier, we got Liat back all the way back from book 1. She's back. She's brought her son against her better judgment. And I mean, of course, we know what happens to him. He ends up dying to save Ota's son. He gives his life. But at the same time, we then have to build off of Ota and Moti having to come to terms with the fact that, Moti thought this was his blood for 30 years. He thought, I have a son. And yes, you have a relationship with this boy. This boy is yours, at least in your heart. And the fact that those two characters reconcile and realize that, hey, he's my blood, but he's your son. And they don't hate each other for it immediately and don't hold that resentment. Like, to build that relationship over 3 entries is just fascinating. Because especially from Betrayal in Winter, the fact that Moti was full willing to let Ota die. Like, he was, don't get me wrong, he was trying to prove him innocent. But if it had called for it, he'd have let him die.
Yeah. It's like the first of all, the relationship, between Ota and Moti, and it's such a complicated relationship because they are friends and they do love each other, but just the choices that they are forced to make, and that the conflict that they are how that runs into conflict with each other. It's like Moti is just such a real character, and Ota too. They feel a lot like, I know how Moti feels. Like any of us who have ever felt not good enough, we know how Moti feels. And if we've ever had friends who we care about deeply, who always seem to land on their feet, we're humans. Like Ota and Moti feel like Hamilton and Burr from the Hamilton musical, but Moti's less violent. It's just like everything they try to do, Ota wins and Moti loses. And I just understand. It's like my brother and I did not speak for 10 years because I thought I had this exact same feeling about my younger brother. It's like, no matter what, my brother doesn't have Asperger's. My brother's good at STEM. Like, he just didn't have the problems that I had in life. And I was just furious about it. And so I know how Moti feels. And so I just identify so much. but Moti hasn't dealt with it. He still thinks he's, but I mean, and then the kid isn't his. Like, talk about it, like, another one. You know what I mean? And then the fact that he can write Kian and Liat not despising each other, despite the fact that, that scene where Kian and Liat are talking after Nait is dead, like, that is just, it's just, I just feel so. This book makes me feel so bad. Like, that's really the thing, is I just feel so bad after so many scenes. I'm just like,
but I think it also elevates. Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
No, you go first.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, just I wanted to say, yes, there are some really tough, heavy things that happen, but I think the book also is elevating because, in spite of the fact that, like, Liat and Kian should be enemies, they have there are things at stake. They have sons by the same father who, in theory, according to the rules of that society, are going to kill each other someday, and so they should be naturally at each other's throats. But they end up actually showing quite a bit of compassion for one another, and they bond, and it's beautiful. So I do think that we do see lots of failure. We do see lots of violence that results from the lack of compassion. We also see examples in here of compassion. Even Ota and Balasar Gais at the end up respecting each other. Yeah. And if that's possible, then I think what Abraham's showing us here is that this kind of compassion, this kind of what to me elevates the story, actually. And Ota and Moti, they're points at which they hate each other, especially Moti with Ota. But at the same time, and I also argue that this applies to Ota and your favorite character, Alan.
Sinja.
Yeah.
Sinja. Freaking Sinja.
We'll talk about him later.
I understand why Sinja does what he does. I just don't like him. I'm just like, I just don't like Sinja.
But you like Moti. He did the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes. But I like Moti. Yeah. They weren't married. And again, I can excuse teenagers are idiots.
They were
teenagers are fools. And yeah, I get it, but I like Moti also. I've had 3 books to like Moti. Sinja
we get to see more of him for sure.
Yeah, Sinja's just, I don't know. I just don't like Sinja. Like, how dare you work against? Though, I mean, I'm fine with him working with Balasar. I like Balasar too. Half the time, I'm like, burn it to the ground, guys. Get him. Just burn it all.
Well, and
Balasar half the time.
Alan's silliness kind of showcases a good point, is that, like, Abraham is good at showing different sides of the same battlefield.
The same conflict, yeah.
Yeah, Sarah said it better than I did. So
yeah, no, it's not just You're right. It is the same side of the battlefield, but this has been a longer conflict than just the battle too. It's just those differing, and it's not even differing ideologies really, because Ota has wrestled with the same fears that Balasar has. The worst thing that he ever did in his life was to prevent exactly what Balasar feared was going to happen. And that's the sad part. That's the tragedy of it, is that Balasar is going in with this kind of single-minded brutality because he feels like it is an all or nothing situation. And there are good people like Ota and Moti who will do anything that they can to prevent the kind of large-scale tragedy that Balasar really fears. So it's all very complex. Like, Daniel Abraham is so good at this. These books are phenomenal. What I was going to say earlier, just as like a tiny throwaway, as like the one girl in the chat, I find it so nice that all of the like conflict and relationship drama comes from the male friendship, whereas the female friendship, we see that kind of support and compassion, because that is not the dynamic that often gets shown in media. And it's nice to see that portrayed in a way that is realistic, because, often female friendship is used as this kind of way to demonstrate how catty girls can be, or, but it's nice to see that it's actually Ota and Moti who have the most difficulty with their friendship, and the women really come through. Like Alan said, the women are a highlight in this series. They are phenomenal, and you get to see them rise to the occasion in so many different ways. And it's really fun to watch.
That's one of the reasons I like the YA book Fireborn. Is in the love triangle, the two women are friends, and like I'm just like, you mean there's a love triangle with two women and they don't hate each other? Like, are you allowed to write that in a book? So yeah, I mean, Ota and Moti just need to get it together. And guys, like, if you buy Geis's reasoning, if you buy Ballister's reasoning, he's doing the only thing that allows that to happen. Like if he goes halfway, it doesn't matter. If he does not eliminate every single person who knows how to summon an Ondot, then he's failed. Like then there was no point for any of it. So either you kill everyone, or you might as well just not kill anybody, because it's not going to matter. They're just going to summon another Ondot, and you're going to be screwed. So it is horrible that Ballister Geis is committing genocide, but it is also the only way that he sees to protect, his country, which it doesn't make it right, but it makes it right to him. And those are the best kind of villains, where you're like, I get it, like I understand, guys.
Yeah, that the whole way, and that's kind of the part until we got the spoilers. I didn't want to go dig in any deeper, but as has been mentioned too, like Oda has struggled with some of the feelings about how, like, is what we're doing with the Ondot right? Obviously, was it Hashai?
Yeah.
Okay, I was trying to go back. Hashai, like, he had a huge problem with Seedless and what he was supposed to use it for. So it's like we'd already seen that, the Ondot are fickle, potentially dangerous, can literally plot against even their poets. So, like, probably not the safest thing. We'd already had those questions brought up. Is it really the best way to base your entire society and economy off of these things? We'd seen all that. And then, bam, Onamor, the prologue, we introduced Geis. And he is so single-minded, but that's what's crazy, is it is so easy to understand where he's coming from and almost root for him, because even though he's being introduced as like the big bad guy that wants to go kill all of the characters we've known for the first two books, you're like, I kind of get it. We've seen what can go wrong, and he wants to just absolutely destroy them. And it's done too where he doesn't want the power for himself, and he's not like the other Gaulds who are just like, oh, we need more money if they can't be winning a trade. He's like, no, this is done. I'm not even going to let my own leadership. They're not going to get Ondot either. No one gets these. These are too dangerous. What I'm doing is terrible. But like, he sees himself as like saving the world, and in a very humble way, because he's not like, I'm saving the world. He's like, I'm doing what I have to do. This is terrible, but what's going to continue to be the world if I don't do it is worse. And just his character and his arc, it was so understandable. And that's having the, like, quote unquote villain be like that, especially when Moti ends up being the one who really does the real, like, damage to everyone. The way that all wove together, I just thought was masterful. And I absolutely loved the way that all worked.
Oh, yeah.
My favorite Balasar moments are when he's dealing with his pet poet.
that idiot. Drunken idiot. Yeah.
Or as Alan would say, that foolish boy.
Foolish fool. Like, what a traitor. But can we talk about, like, one of my favorite moments, which is just sitting there having a conversation, and all of a sudden Stone Made Soft looks up and says, oh, yeah, that's interesting. And then gone. And then Samaya's like, I didn't do anything. And they're just panicking. And Stone Made Soft, I can't think of a better way Abraham could have shown what had happened. Like, it was so good. Like, just the way that he showed that it worked. Because I'm just like, is he really going to free all the Ondot? Like, is this really something that's about to happen in this book? Surely not. And that's interesting. And then it's done. And I'm just like, oh, that sucks for the Kaie, these monks that don't know how to freaking fight. Rip.
Yes.
Well, and it's funny because, like, the Dyke Vo just kind of goes on lockdown. Like, they clam up. They don't know what to do about it.
And then he straight up murders the Dyke Vo and
all
the poets, just like, burning the books. Done.
Yeah, it's a very Star Wars moment. Like all those poor little like baby poets just.
He straight up Order 66 to all
I
of them.
didn't even think about that, Sarah. That's
I was thinking about it the
fantastic.
whole time. I was like, oh god, Balasar is Anakin Skywalker, like
He
walking
is
into
not.
the Jedi
Stop
temple.
that.
Oh my god. Why
After
would you put that in? Why would you say something so controversial yet so
No.
brave?
Alistair Guy is not Anakin Skywalker.
I don't think they share many similarities. Just that moment where like you know that he's going in to actually Balasar wasn't there, so it's whoever Balasar sent. Balasar didn't go to the
He
children.
sent Houston. Houston
Yeah.
was the one. He
There
sent.
we go.
Yeah.
He's Anakin. Balasar is Palpatine.
Houston's the one. He's the one that kills Naid, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
He is. Yeah, the other one is Cole. The two survivors are Houston and Cole. And Cole is the one that Ota outsmarts by shooting the steam engines and making them blow up. And the first real victory for the Kayam, actually, and in this conflict where they really outmatched. So you see Ota's flexibility and which you've seen from his youth, his defiance of the social order, his ability to think outside the box is what makes this a conflict at all. Otherwise, the Kayam were in deep doo-doo. So, yeah, but that it's so interesting how the stakes are set up right from that prologue, and you see the consequences of the Ondot getting out of control in the old empire, in this wasteland full of monsters and all kinds of. I mean, that's why Balasar is the way he is. He's seen it, and he is going to do everything in his power to make sure this doesn't happen ever again anywhere else. But of course, at the same time, we love characters who he's going to wipe out. So it's really quite effectively done.
Well, and part of the genius that is Abraham is just the poor timing, because like Ota is prepared. He's created this mercenary band, like in case of eventuality of invasion or something like that. And then due to politics, he's got to be like, hey, you gotta get out of Dodge. People are getting a little bit tetchy about this. Yeah. And then what should happen that they ride right into Balasar's camp and they get used against him. And then there's nobody who knows how to fight. And so they just get steamrolled.
Yeah. Yeah. And that I again, like there's so many like things I hadn't seen in fantasy in this book. The description of the battle where literally people have no idea what they're doing. None of them have ever been in a fight before. And Ota commenting on how freaking loud it is. Like it's deafening. Like he can't hear anything. No one ever told him that battle was this loud when those armies clash. And just Ota dealing with the fact that he has sent these men to die because that's what they're going to do, because they have no idea how they cannot fight this, this bellicose nation toe to toe. And they do, and they fight and they lose and they retreat. And Ota dealing with the guilt of he didn't have a choice. He had to do this. He had to lead them and try to stop them. But he had no idea what he was doing. They had no idea what they were doing. He has sent them. He ordered their deaths. And it's just so loud and so messy. And it's just, it just feels so very different than battle sequences often do in fantasy, because like Abraham is just good. He is so adept at writing the status of characters, like characters being middle-aged and feeling like they've grown, characters being out of their depth. I think he writes these fish out of water, these characters out of their depth, characters really better than pretty much anyone I can think of. There's a character like that in Dagger and Coin, and it's just good. Like all the lack of self-confidence that we have when we're dealing with these kind of things. I mean, I've never sent people to war, but it's just all very nuanced. It's all very nuanced that just makes the portrayal all that much richer.
I think some of the best portrayals of like when we realize that these guys are not in their prime is always Moti is just always out of breath because he is just so at it. He's just let himself go. And like literally he's just like, I haven't had to run like that. And
he's also stressed. Like he's just a high strung guy for the last 14 years has felt, useless, and so he just sits there and eats and wonders how he's gonna how can I be the hero?
Yeah, and so we kind of get to you're not a young guy anymore, Moti. You are in fact not playing tennis,
not like
and
Philip.
staying in shape.
Yeah, not like Philip.
So I was gonna make a joke
recruited,
earlier about
unfortunately, for the army.
Yeah. What's
Oh,
that,
what'd you say?
Nico?
Sorry. I was saying, I missed what Sarah was saying. But earlier I was going to make a joke about the first time that the Kayam won. It was because they had the high ground. But then Philip, you mentioned the steam wagons, and that just reminded me of a very small thing, but something I really enjoyed. Just a little bit of discussion that, once again, the other thing the Andot did is in a lot of ways keeps the Quartet from advancing, because they have the Andot. Why would they need to develop anything new? And that also kind of elevated other things, because from the second book, where we had the guy, I can't remember who gets murdered first thing, but he wanted to develop all of this new stuff with mining to get the water out. Mm-hmm. And he was actually trying to advance, despite the fact that it's we have an Andot. Why do we need to worry about that?
Yeah, we got Stonemaid Soft. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. And it's just, and that was even kind of talked about, where it's the Kayam would have never come up with steam wagons. And there's even comment that they would have thought it was stupid. And there was literally in either the first or second book, I remember there was a small scene where somebody was inventing it, and nobody cared and thought it was dumb. And so it was very true that they didn't, but then it goes to Gaul and they're yeah, we're going to develop this and advance even further. And so it just shows that even over time, it's just the Gauls were the advancing society, and the Kayam were just kind of stuck in their ways of doing things the way they were. And you get some real life parallels, because you've seen cultures like that too, where it's, this culture ends up getting wiped out because they haven't advanced, but just kind of the idea that they were kind of willfully keeping themselves back too. I liked how that was explored.
They seem willfully stagnant.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, if you have I was just gonna say, agreeing with you, Andrew. If you have a piece of magic or technology, whatever, that makes you superior to everybody else around you, then that's a recipe for stagnation often. So they relied on that because it worked for a long time, but also it made them stagnant. Absolutely. But I was going to say the complexity of the characters is something that, and just seeing them on the ground, trying to make decisions in the midst of these messes. That's where I think I understand Sinja, at least his constantly, you're not sure which side he's going to come down on. I don't think he knows which side he's going to come down on ultimately, but I think he is loyal to one thing at least, and that is Kian. He is loyal to that. And ultimately that's where he comes down, I think, is his loyalty to her is what dictates his final decision, which fortunately, he ends up not betraying Ota. He ends up betraying Balasar. He's going to betray somebody, right? He has to. And I don't think any one of us could be in Sinja's situation and not feel completely conflicted and, knowing what to do. First of all, you're basically being held hostage he's being held hostage by Balasar. So in that situation, you either do what I want or you're dead. So what are most of us going to do? We're going to do what he wants, at least pretend to, as convincingly as they can. Of course, Houston never buys it, right? He's like, no, about this guy. So ultimately, though, where he lands, I think, is as loyal as he can get, where he is faithful to Kian at least, and he tries to save her son, and he tries to make that the best of that situation there. He even tries to save Nayat as well, although it's kind of a hopeless situation there. And he ultimately is saved weirdly by Sterile, and that's really quite a scene actually. But I get him, and even okay. So we don't know exactly what happened between him and Kian, but I assume that there was some kind of relationship between them. And that's not just him, though. That also, you have to say that Kian was part of that. Whatever it was that happened, it seems like ultimately she's the one that broke it off and said, no, this is how it's going to be from now on. And we're not doing this anymore. At least that's what I got from it.
That's what it's.
I don't think you can just blame Sinja for that.
I can, and I do.
And I have.
Maybe you can't. I can. Kian is blameless. See, that's how I picture it. I picture it that they didn't actually have a relationship, and that Sinja like just confessed his love, or was inappropriate, like maybe misread the moment and, you know, grabbed her and kissed her like you see in you know, TV all the time, and that maybe she didn't break it off like right away and thought that maybe there was something there, but she had more self-control than Sinja did, and then she told Ota, and you know, and that was it. That is how I justify it in my.
See, that's kind of how I pictured what had happened.
Yeah, I mean, I
got the sense of betrayal, though, that Ota says to her at one point, "No, let's just not go there. Let's not talk about that again." So I felt like something happened there.
Yes, I was feeling like more of an emotional investment or something, like a sharing of feelings. Maybe it didn't progress to anything, because I think, especially for Kian, you know, she'd want to avoid any possibility of pregnancy at all costs, just because of what that means in her society. But to me, it seemed like there was some sort of emotional relationship between the two of them that then was becoming inappropriate and was ended by her. That was my interpretation, anyway.
We have
an emotional affair. Yeah.
I will say, though, one of my favorite character interactions or conversations in the entire book is when he just straight face tells him, he's like, "Yeah, these are my terms for the betrayal. Like, I get you," and she's like, "I'll kill you."
Oh,
and he was just like, "I know."
Yeah, shut up, Sinja.
I love that.
From the text, it did sound like, because when she was talking about it too, it did sound like she was definitely complicit in whatever happened, and it sounds like you know, things went definitely a little bit farther, I think, than just emotional, because she even specifically makes a comment at one point to Ota, like, "I was never, you know, completely with him in that way," you know, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, there's a comment in there, so it sounds like there was definitely something going on. And that's where I think she is equally at fault from the way it sounds. It almost made me think that she was the one who initiated it.
How dare you?
With the way it was worded.
Pistols at dawn. Pistols at dawn.
This isn't, Alan, this is an Abraham book. Women have agency and can be bad too. Come on.
Yes, they can, but she's not.
But she's not.
But, well, it's interesting.
Dawn has plenty of agency and is a horrific human being.
I'll turn it back to.
Are you kidding? Idan is a saint. You take that back.
I like
Idan was terrible. A
Idan was
fantastic character, but she was terrible. But it was interesting to see how Ota reacted differently to Kian's somewhat infidelity versus Leon in the first book too, and kind of those changes. So that also
he's older.
Interesting perspective.
Yeah.
He's older. He's matured. He's loved lots of different people at that point, and he kind of gets it, I think, at that point. So.
And I think it's very clear that he cannot put the investment into his family that he would like to. He is someone who obviously cares a lot about his family, knows that it's important to spend time with him, and then also understands that he is taken up by his duty far more than he would like to be. And you see that's his daughter.
I agree. So that's why I think something happened between Kian and Sinja, was that Ota was busy taking care of Machi. And that's why you see that guilt where he's trying to make up for it by reading to his son. And, you know, he's trying to. So I think he blames himself a little bit too. But there's pain there. There's really pain there, I think, where he doesn't want for her to even talk about that anymore. It's like, okay, we're done with that, you know.
Ota he carries around so much guilt, and, you know, all streaming back from you know, he murdered Heshai, but everything, like, Moti just feels responsible for everything. Look at the lengths he's gone to keep his family safe. He has defied all tradition. He's taken one wife. He has had one male child, and he has not had any more. He's like, I'm not going to have any more. And then, you know, Nait shows up and he's like, stop it. No, like, that is Moti's son. Because again, if it's Ota's son, then everything he's done I always feel like Ota is just he feels like Sisyphus. Like no matter what he does, it's just undone. He takes every precaution, and then something he didn't think of occurs. And so both him and Moti just feel so out of control of their own destinies when they're desperately trying to like wrest some control of it. Moti wants to be important. Ota is too important and doesn't want it, but is the only one who can do it. And so he just has this burden of responsibility on him. And Moti's the guy who's like, no, give me responsibility. Let me show what I can do when given that, because everyone is like, well, we're not gonna let Moti do it. Moti screwed that up. Well, Moti screwed that up too. And well, I mean, Moti's gonna, and then so Ota's like, Moti, like, you got to figure out a way to stop these guys. Like, Moti, do you think you can? You said you figured out a way to ignore the price. Go, like, summon the Ondat. And Moti's like, it's my time. Like, it's my time. And he, like, I mean, people get in this situation. Moti's sitting there and he's like, I'm going to let people down again. They're going to be like, well, Moti screwed that up too. And so that's when he's like, all right, well, what if I stopped trying to include the seedless part and just did the attack part? And he's able to do it. He takes that shortcut because he doesn't want to fail again. He can't do it. He can't live with it again.
I feel like that is more selfish in nature than anything. I don't know if we diverge here, but like, I think that he does want to do it and he does want to make sure that he doesn't mess it up. But I think he wants it for himself. I think it's because he, like you said, he wants to feel like he has accomplished something. Like it is definitely rooted more from jealousy.
The thing is, both things can be true. Like he can both want to help and also be the one who helped.
Yeah.
Well, and we also know, like, they're like, Samai is like, hey, it's workable, but like we need more time. And they go, you don't have time. So we kind of saw it coming where they were like, yeah, we kind of needed another 3 months.
Yeah.
And they're like, great, you've got 30 minutes. And so it might have worked if they'd had those 3 months.
There's so much tension in this book, like where you were talking about the time between the race to the Ondat and the army that is slowly progressing forward, but also, I don't know if it was Philip or Alan talked about him reading to his son, like those moments between Ota and his son just make you so worried that his son is going to die at any moment, like that he is going to be unwell and he is going to pass away. And so there's all of this tension. It was really hard to read this book sometimes because I was just waiting for the next bad thing to happen.
Well, I loved the fact that like there were times where he's like, I can't do it anymore. I cancel all my meetings. Like I'm reading to my family today, or like we're going to go have a family day. Cause you never see like a king just be like, cancel all of my royal crap. And I'm just going to go piss off in the pool.
Just Sam Vimes. It was very Sam Vimes of him. He's like, it's reading time. I got to go read to my kids.
Yeah. Where is my cow?
That's right. So good. What a good book. Good book.
I love that. Yeah, we're agreeing about almost everything except for that one thing.
What, the Sinja thing?
Yeah. Well, that's where too. It's like there's been so many things that I was planning on saying, and then like somebody else starts, and I'm like, oh, you're probably going to cover what I was going to say, so just letting everybody go. So it's because we all have pointed out a lot of really similar things, so that makes it a fun conversation.
I don't know if these parts touched you in any way, Philip, but I found it really hard, the relationship that Ota and his daughter had, and then seeing the closeness between Moti and Ota's daughter. And she obviously loves her dad, but she has that resentment for him because he was busy and he doesn't want to be busy and he doesn't want to have spent this much time away from his family. But that was so heartbreaking. And then for it to tie in that way at the end where Moti is the one that hurts her, like all of that was just such a big jumble of feelings. And it was really hard because you could see it early on.
And also how Cyril points out that you wanted to be the father because you felt like Ota you were jealous of Ota, and you realized that he was actually the father of Nayat, and it was like I think Sterile was telling the truth, but only part of the truth, and was really trying to hurt Moti in that moment by telling him these facets of himself. We love Moti, and we realize he's deeply flawed, and we realize that he's trying to compensate, and that this is, in his mind, he's trying to redeem himself, which is what, yes, he's trying to save people that he loves, he's trying to save his society, but he also wants to redeem himself. And all of that is true simultaneously. And as you said, Sarah, it's just such like a jumble of different and sometimes even conflicting things all alongside each other. And Abraham, I mean, just tells you just how good he is with characters, because that is so true to life. That is so true to what we are as we muddle our way through, right?
Well, and building off what you just said, Philip, you know, with the character work, is it flows so perfectly from the last book into this book, is because we know Ota did not seek to be the Kaimachi. It was not his decision. Like, Idan pulled him into this by like killing him and then like trying to frame him, or like killing all the brothers, trying to frame him and stuff like that. So he had no choice. I think Ota wanted to be a family man. In fact, like he was like, yeah, I'll just be your courier and like I'll stay here. And Kion was like, no, you got to go, bro. In the last book, and we kind of see that flow through almost seamlessly into this entry. And we see him, you know, because he struggles with, you know, following the rules and the traditions that he thinks are foolish, and, you know, kind of almost self-destructive for his society. But nobody's willing to listen to him because this is the way the Kayam's always been. And so they push back on him. And so he gets frustrated and then like dives in further, but he wants to be a family man. He wants his family. He doesn't want his kids to kill each other, and it just all flows so seamlessly and perfectly.
Yeah. There's a lot of like just, I can't even think of the word I'm thinking of, but where with a lot of the characters you'll see like symmetry, there we go, and
words
between two different story points as well, because like with Ota and Moti, like we kind of talked about, so you know, like Moti kind of comes in and like they're friends, but he like takes Oda's place and has, you know, a child with Liat, obviously, and then Ota kind of moves on. But Ota just wants to settle down and have a family and do that, but then he ends up becoming the Kai and not having time. Whereas Moti really had the opportunity to have a family, let it kind of slip through his hands and failed at it, but then tries to like, you know, fill that role with Oda's children and kind of go in there, and then ends up making it worse too. And you had that with Samai and Moti as well. Whereas, you know, in the first book, Moti fails miserably with everything he's supposed to be doing with keeping the Andot and like his priorities and everything, and choosing Liat over trying. Whereas in book 2, it feels like it's leading up to virtually the same thing with Samai, but he's like, nope, I'm going to just go in and I'm going to drill in and focus. I'm going to do what I need to do. And yet he still loses the Andot. And that's what makes it so much worse in book 3. He did everything right. Like, we love Moti, but he did everything wrong. And like Samai did everything right, still loses the Andot. And it's just so broken, because it's like, despite the fact that he did everything he could, his priorities were in the right place, he still lost it. And there was nothing he could do about it. And so it's those kind of like seeing the other side of the coin with the characters and people in similar situations, but making very different decisions and having very different effects. And sometimes it still comes to nothing, no matter what.
Yeah, I just want to remark too on how this was the first book in the series where I actually teared up a couple times. That scene between Moti and Nayat, when he first dares to call him son in that moment, and they have this connection, and he's scared because he thinks he's scared of being rejected in that moment. But Nayat reciprocates and calls him father. That's a beautiful scene. That's just so beautiful. But I also found the relationship, as I said before, between Liat and Kion to be very moving, as they figured out a way to show compassion to each other in spite of being thrust into the situation where they should be enemies. I thought that was just beautiful how that evolved as well. So it's it's a book that has some really beautiful moments in it that have built on the earlier books, because I feel this way about Moti because I know what he went through and I know his failings, and I know I know what Liat went through, and I know what Kian has been through. And so for them to be making these connections in spite of all the pain and the suffering they've been through, sometimes, caused by each other. It's just beautiful to see that.
Yeah.
So, Philip, you reminded me of something I was going to say way earlier. So thank you, because I'd completely forgotten.
Good.
So the other thing with Night that made it such a complicated relationship too is that this whole time, well, he's meeting the father that he barely knew his whole life because he sort of walked out, even though we know it was more complicated than that. He's a little more understanding maybe because he's considering walking out on his family.
Yeah.
And it's just like that added
I forgot about that.
to it. It's just because it completely like recontextualized the situation. You'd expect him to be like, why weren't you there, and blame him, or potentially blame Leah, like, why didn't you let him be around? But it's like, I'm thinking about leaving my family behind. And maybe if I can forgive you, I'll feel less guilty about it. And I'm just like, oh man, that was such a unique viewpoint.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say about Nait just himself, like his character arc where he doesn't want to be tied down. Like he wants some excitement. He wants his life to have meaning, like rather than this just boring settling down with whatever. And he finds that meaning in his ability to sacrifice his own life to save the Knots.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why because I didn't really care about Nait. I'm like, Nait, like, what is your problem, man? Like, grow up. Like, just grow up, stay with your family. I'm sorry your life's boring. Eat it. But then, as he develops that relationship with Ota and with Danat, and then he throws himself in front of it so that Danat doesn't die. It was just the implications of that for him. One, I think he finally, didn't feel like wrong. It didn't feel like this failure of a dad. Didn't feel like he couldn't, protect his family. He couldn't do anything. But he's able to protect his little brother. And then, what that's going to do to Liat, that whole moment where Nait dies is just, it was just another moment of just like, oh man, this is so bad for so many reasons.
Yeah. But in struggling to protect Danat, he's in his own mind redeeming himself from neglecting his own son, his own family. And he's a tragic figure. He wanted to be a good man. He kept saying that, I just want to be a good man. How do I do this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Oh, I just got chills. He just wants to be a good man.
Yeah, he was a difficult character for me to like. I think it was seeing him through his mom's eyes that was the more like, that is what made me care when he died, is because how much she loves him. She doesn't care if he's good or bad. And she says that, like, I don't care if you're the worst person in the world, just don't die because you were my son.
Right. She even says, somebody said, he died a hero and blah, blah. She said, no, he was not a hero. He was an idiot. He slept with lots of women between home and here. And I just miss him, and that broke me up a lot too, was seeing her grief. And it's just so effectively portrayed the state that she's in, that stage of grief that she's in. Is just it felt so authentic to me, that whole conversation between her and Kian at the end. That's just powerful stuff.
Yeah. Where Kian is trying to make her, like, there's nothing I can say that's going to make it better. And she's like, you're right. Like, she didn't care. She doesn't care why he died. All that matters is that he's dead. And we've all been in massive, like, we've all suffered grief. It doesn't make you feel any better. Like, when people are like, well, I mean, like, that doesn't make anybody feel any better. There's nothing anybody can say. Like, there's nothing anybody can say to Liat to make her feel better.
No.
But Kian's trying, and I love their relationship, the two of them. It's so good.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things that I loved about having Liat back is the fact that it felt so effortless to reintroduce her into the story, even though she's technically been gone for 30 years going on?
Yeah, it's been 30 years since we've seen Liat.
Air quotes 30 years, but I mean, she just slides back in, and then what I really loved was seeing the vulnerability. Like she's this strong character who kind of reinforces Moti's frailness. And when they kind of recontextualize the relationship, she's just like, I'm not coming back to you. You're more comfort than me. Like, I love you, but at the same time, like, we're not going to be together. That's not what this is. And she sets very clear boundaries. She's become this very matronly, very mature, very strong female character. To where she's like, I don't really like need a man. I've had lovers. I've had many men since you left. And it's just like, yeah, like she's bad. And that's my channel, I'll swear. No, but
the one keeping an eye out for the Galts, if it hadn't been for her.
She's such a strong character that like it felt refreshing to have her back instead of just you just needed somebody to bring. Like some authors would just recycle a character and it would feel kind of stale, which in Abraham's Expanse series, that sometimes feels kind of recycled. Here it just feels fresh and genuine, and I loved it.
Well, and it brought back to sorry, go ahead, Phil.
I'll be real quick. I just love how Leah has grown into Amat from the first book.
Yes.
Yeah. She followed her footsteps. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say the exact same thing. So that's why it worked. That has happened so many times.
Sorry.
That's why I'm just like, you guys go ahead, man.
I think Abraham does aging of characters better than pretty much. I can't think of another author that handles it better. Because I've read since then some books where there are time skips within them, or like within the book or the next book, and it's various stages of success at it. But like Abraham is just the best at. These people are older, they are different, but they are still the same, and that's so hard to do because they have to be recognizable to the reader. But we also have to believe that it's 15 years later and not 6 months later. Like anyone can say, oh, well, it's 15 years later. Would I know that if for example, if Daniel Abraham, if you took scenes, and let's say you forgot what book they're from, but if you took scenes from all 4 of these books and, scrambled them up, I could identify what age they're at in each of those scenes, even if I forgot what book they were from, because they act like 30-year-olds in Betrayal in Winter, and they act like they're pushing 50 in Autumn War. They act like senior citizens in Price of Spring, and
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't thrilled just to get some old crotchety people.
Oh man, Price of Spring. All I can say is it's just so good. And then Shadow and Summer, you can easily recognize them. Like teenagers are the most easily recognizable people in writing. They're so different than they are in this book as teenagers. So I'm so excited for y'all to read Price of Spring because. Yeah. Just read the prologue, just so you can see what this book's about. Because just like the prologue in this one, it tells you what the book's about in the prologue. So good.
That seems a good segue into like wishes and thoughts of what do you expect from the final book, and what
I will say it's one of the best conclusions of a series that I've read. Like it is whether you like what happens or not, it is extraordinarily satisfying.
I don't even know what I want to happen, to be honest. Like immediately after finishing an Autumn War, like so many things were spinning in my head, but it's just the way that ended. There's so many things that could be done. And at this point, I just completely trust that Abraham is going to give me the best version of any of the 1,000 possibilities that jumped in my head. So I'm very excited to read it. This is one where I really don't even have like a lot of predictions or anything. I'm along for the ride, and I can't wait to see what brilliant thing he does with book 4.
You're ready.
I'm going to predict right now the return of Idan. Because she was gone for this book, and I was wondering the whole time, I wonder what she's doing while the Galts are.
I did expect her back too.
Yeah. So, but I also want to see the culmination of the relationship between Ota and Moti, which has been sort of a thread running through this whole thing. So we'll see if that happens or not. But yeah, I mean, anything, whatever he does, I trust him at this point. So yeah.
Well, I mean, where we left off, we're to the point where is it the men of Gult are sterile and the women
Of the
of the
Kai.
Kayam? So, I mean, in order to survive, we have to have this melding of societies. And I'm expecting a bunch of political fallout from that. So I'm predicting a lot of political intrigue or difficulties, I should say. I think if I have to guess any character, I would like to see Idan return. And I think Moti is in hiding, training up a new batch of poets or something.
Well, again, I don't think it's going to be a real quick thing. Everyone's going to be like, all right, guess we got to intermix our cultures. I have a feeling there's going to be like a lot more of like places
it's going to be
dying
messy.
out, populations getting ready. And granted, I think if it's only like 15 years, that won't be enough time for like anything crazy, but it'll have become very obvious, I think, what the issue is. So I think there'll still be a lot of conflict there. But based on like the title alone, I think it's showing some sort of maybe peace that'll be happening, but
some sort of regrowth, I suppose. We can expect something. It's going to be I agree. I don't know what's coming. I think that Ota's daughter is going to have a big role in the next book. That's my prediction, that we're either going to follow her or she's going to have some major role to play. And I agree with Nico. I'm looking forward to seeing, because we have seen it many times in fantasy, this expansion into this kind of colonial invasion into other countries, but this is an interesting setup where we do have the blending of these two cultures forcefully, but from problems on both sides. Like it's going to be a very unique take on that melding of cultures. So we'll see how it goes. Alan tells us that it's satisfying and amazing. So he's got the nameplate. So we have to listen to him.
It is an excellent book. I only know one person who doesn't like this book, and it's Albert, because he doesn't like Moti. And so if you don't like either Ota or Moti, like you won't like it, because Ota and Moti are the main characters. So but yeah, I can't wait to see what you guys think.
I'm going to make one more prediction, and that is that on Jeopardy today, Alan's going to have some LPQ questions, because he's been working on his Jeopardy questions there, I think.
I have. The problem is that I guess 2 of y'all have read Long Price Quartet.
We'll see.
It's just like, that made my life so much easier.
Excellent. Well, thanks everybody for coming. Thanks everyone.
Go read the series.
Yes.
If you're watching the 3rd book, you're probably reading it. I'm probably reading it already.
Continue reading the series is what we should say.
Indeed.
All right. Awesome. We'll see everybody on Philip's channel for the finale.
The finale. Oh.